Hey, nice to see you.
So
Oh
good
my
to see
goodness.
That's been a while.
You too. It's been forever.
Us too.
you. Oh my
Look at
goodness.
you doing big things, writing books and all this stuff. We're so
Seems
proud
that
of you.
way. Oh, thanks, Brian. That's so sweet. Yeah, it was quite a journey, but hey, life is it not?
Yes.
I don't think, like when we all met first, podcasting was not a thing, right?
Yeah. No.
This was not the world we were in. And I mean, it's not really 100 years ago, but yeah, things have really changed.
Yeah, it really has. Yeah, and we're just doing this for fun and to get to connect with people we want to connect with and learn and
great.
grow ourselves. And
It's really cool to catch up with people that probably without this podcast we wouldn't have talked to. Like for you example, who knows if maybe we would have, but we would have. And learning from so many people, it's been great too.
No, it's wonderful. And just also, it's such a great service. Like I've listened to some of the past episodes and you're sharing such amazing information and holding space for people to really talk about stuff that matters. It really matters, So
Yeah. And I definitely want to talk about the first chapter too, and you can tell us a little bit more about that because that is I would say part of my process is still having my BCBA, but changing it, not running away from it the way it's been utilized and how it is perceived. And can it change? I think, I hope so. And so we've met Julie Gordon. She was in the same boat where she was like, I don't want to do ABA. It's just such a bad stigma, but she's like, I'm not going to run. I'm going to try to change. And so, yeah.
Exactly.
Love to talk about that.
Oh, I think that it's so important, Brian, because I think that's, if we're not sort of growing and reflecting on our work as we go, then sooner or later we're going to wake up one morning and realize that we actually don't really believe what we're doing anymore. We don't like what we're doing. We're maybe doing harm where we're not intending by any means to do harm. I think it's really important, but I so agree with you that, if we do wake up to that, it's really just a huge loss if we take all the experience and all the stuff we've learned and then leave the profession. Right? Like, what a loss. So far better is to sort of sit with ourselves until we realize, okay, we did the best we could with what we knew, and now that we know better, we can actually do better here. Yeah.
Turning a blind eye, you can't. How do you turn a blind eye and say, this is what's happening, well, I don't want to be a part of that, so I'm going to do my own thing? You can't. You have to help all the people that in the future may be affected negatively by services that were maybe once okay in the 60s and 70s, but now we know it's what's happening.
Yeah, and I think it's hard for me personally to stay and stick in that side of the field because it feels so daunting and overwhelming that there are so many people still practicing things that were from the 60s, from the beginning that are outdated, and we know now from hearing the voices of people who have experienced it that it was traumatic and it's not helpful and all of the things. So to stick on that kind of side of things and under that umbrella versus just completely still staying in the field but doing completely, what I feel is best, where it's like I'm caught in this, I don't know what you would call it, but just this struggle of just feeling that daunting task of trying to share with people, as I've been doing since we started, and just that it's, but then I see hope. I do see a lot of people in that side of the field, I don't know how to refer to it, but that are shifting and changing and adopting ACT and acceptance and commitment therapy and addressing feelings and internal private events, which were shunned, you weren't allowed to talk about that before. And so I do see a shift, and that's promising, but it is very daunting and overwhelming. And then the stigma it is just, you don't want to be attached to that.
But Catherine, I think it's like in response to that, like in my world now, that we would refer to that as moral injury, like really sort of being yourself being hurt by the work that you're doing. Right? And I think it's just really important that once we recognize it, we also recognize that cannot carry responsibility for what the entire profession is choosing to do. We are responsible for what we do day to day and what we bring and what we share and put out there. And so it just goes back always, for me, it goes back to when I know a little better about what's going on, then I can do a little better, right? And that's how it spreads. And oh, I so hear you when you say, like, it feels overwhelming if we spend too much time thinking about the extent of the damage and the trauma. And I don't think we need to think about it much further than realizing it has happened, it continues to happen, and we don't need to be part of that. We can do it, we can do differently and better for people. Yeah.
It just takes so long. It takes such time. It's going to take years and years and years, right? And
change.
It's overwhelming.
Change never happens at the pace we want it to. Change happens at the pace that the world can cope with it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, we can't be pushing.
Yeah, I think since the beginning, we both started a school for autism early on that was very intensive, very traditional, very that approach. And, you know, it never felt right. It never felt like I had a 2-year-old that I was sitting at a table and supposed to be drilling him, but it's like, no, let's get on the floor and play and he was so sad, and we had a consultant come in and address that, and she said, no, go outside, go play, get him on the swing, have fun, he's 2, like, and all the kids at the school, she said that. But that opened my world up to the training that we were a part of together, and opened up. And so from then on, 2 years in, I've been advocating for that relational side of things, the developmental side of things, and it's just always been this struggle. I dragged Brian over to our side of the world too. But
Yay!
It's like,
Are you
welcome home, Brian.
No, you're intentionally avoiding.
Oh, I don't know. Should we be saying?
Yes, sure.
Like, we didn't say ABA either, did we?
I did. That's okay. My recent challenge that I thought I would never do an ABA clinic again after all my experiences, and I took on a challenge of part-time going and really wanting to help them see alternatives, help them see there's another path, there's another more humanistic approach that can be empathetic but still learning and growth. And I've been there about 6 months, and more every day people are coming up to me and asking me, and somebody was physically prompting somebody to get out of the way the other day, and I said, you know, what would it be like if I did that to you? She's like, oh, I wouldn't like that, right? And it's like, oh yeah, well, I'm guessing the client wouldn't like that either. And like this light bulb went off, and I was like, okay, this is where I need to be right now, and it is really fulfilling to see that kind of the open-minded, there is people's capacity to see that, yeah, this doesn't make sense, right? And so,
well, and I think that what you're noticing, Brian, is that there is readiness and there is hunger now for this. People are ready. They don't necessarily know how to do it, and that's, for me personally, that's why I wrote the book. That's why I wrote the book, because there are wonderful books out there, and I have a way of working that people really pick up. But what's been needed is this interest and this recognition, right? So it takes the brave person like yourself to say, wait a minute, how might that feel? How might that feel to this other individual, right? Because that individual is not in a place or space where they can speak that for themselves. So you get to say it, and then the professional in that setting was able to go, oh yeah, I actually wouldn't like to be spoken to in that way. That wouldn't be helpful.
Yeah, and I think that's all it takes that's all you have to do really, is put yourself in anyone else's shoes, right? And say, how might that feel? And not just with autism or any neurodiversity, anybody. Like, it's just, how might they feel? And that just shifts your whole perspective around how you approach.
And I try to understand. It's so fascinating. Like, now that I see it, I'm like, how did I never see it? How did I not see it before? It's just, my overall is just like, treat them how you learned and how you want to be treated. And my check-in is, how would you do this with your best friend, or how would you want somebody to do this with you? And if it's not how you would want it, then maybe we make a shift. And is there a less intrusive, less forceful, when, like you said, learning takes time? Do we demand them to learn something in this moment? No, that doesn't make sense. We all take experiences and time, and so I think that's...
For sure.
Why did it go so far the opposite way? this way of teaching people. What do you know, Ruth? We should know, right?
That's kind of
Have they
sounding like
answered?
that's sounding like, why does the universe look the way it looks? I don't know, Catherine.
I ask those questions to myself every day, right?
Well, yeah, I know, right? They're huge. I think one of the things, and I'll be a little cautious here, but I think one of the things that did lead us astray in this world is the idea that data is, we need to be collecting the data. We need to be monitoring and check-marking boxes. And, the idea that people change because somebody else has collected the data and then done something with it. Right there, I think we were heading down a really challenging path. I mean, let's face it, it was a long time ago that Lobos began having his interesting ideas. Right.
Or also the idea that people need to be fixed. Need to fix them, right?
Exactly so. Yeah, that the problem lies within. First of all, that there is a problem, and second of all, that the problem lies within one individual. When there are two involved in every interaction. So, like for me, that's what I refer to as sort of the cross neurotype relationship, right? You can have cross neurotype parent-child relationships, cross neurotype marriages, and for sure cross neurotype therapy, right? And when there are two different neurotypes struggling to communicate with one another, it's not that one is right and the other one is wrong. It's that you've got two minds who need a little help to kind of understand each other. And they also need a little extra space and a little extra time and a little extra flexibility and good humor and all of that stuff, right? A bit more support. And then we find a space where one can influence the other through relationship, not by collecting data and check marking a box.
Even in our relationship, it's it's two different minds, different experiences, different tasks that we need all those things as well. Yeah, that
challenges
right.
ourselves.
time and space and
right.
understanding. And I'm slowly coming to that maybe I'm not always right. I do feel that way. And Catherine,
For real?
I know.
Oh my
Can you
goodness,
believe
Brian!
it?
Who knew? Who knew?
I know it's hard to believe, but
It is, but see, that's beautiful, right? And my guess is, because I can see Catherine nodding, but my guess is that feels kind of nice for her to hear you say that.
yeah.
That's how cross neurotype alliances work, right? And yeah, it works on both sides, and we need to name it and recognize it and come from that space, not from the space of somebody at some point decided that 2-year-old that you talked about, Catherine, would repeat whatever the phrase was in a certain way at a certain time. Like, what a ludicrous way of trying to support, I use the word loosely, but support a child.
And getting them to see our perspective. My perspective is right. You need to do things this way. Be in my perspective. See it. See the world how I am telling you to see it. That just sounds chaotic as well, right? Because the beautiful part of relationships in the world is our own unique contributions.
Yes.
And growing together, and learning from each other, not trying to fit everybody into this mold of this is what you need to do. This is how you need to say it. Like
Right.
when they do chaining, you need to wash your hands this way. It makes me crazy. Like, we all wash our hands differently. Who cares?
Yeah.
What does it matter?
Isn't that the truth, right? As long as the hands end up pretty clean, we're all good, right? They don't even have to be dry, by the way. Just clean is good enough.
Wiping them off on my pants as I walk out the door. I'm rushing. Sometimes it's quicker than others. Sometimes they're using hand sanitizer.
Right.
Sometimes, yeah.
And the data on you said you don't know how to wash your hands. Maybe I need to teach you, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Well,
And
you
we
don't
collect
do that because you're a certain neurotype, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you used an expression there, Brian, that I also think has been really damaging along the way, which is you need to. You need to do it this way. You need to speak it this way. You need to actually see the world the way I see it. If I'm the neurotypical and you're the neurodivergent person, right? No, I don't need to. I absolutely don't need to. You need me to? Well, that's your problem. I don't need to.
I like that.
right?
It's your problem.
So
Yeah.
that's something I often, I find a lot of the clients that I work with have phrases like that they've heard spoken so many times through their lives. By the time they come to therapy, they're able to share. Like when I ask, because I always ask about, are there words I shouldn't use? Are there phrases you find really triggering? Let's work around those. We don't need to say them. And I often hear people say, yeah, don't ever tell me what I need to do.
Well, who wants
Because
to
I
hear
know what
that?
I need.
Yes.
Right?
And who
wants to?
I mean, I don't like to be told what to do, and I don't like anybody suggesting that I don't know a lot of people that do like that. Some people might. I mean, we don't want to discount that people might prefer that, but I think the majority of the people want to have that autonomy and want to make a choice and want to have a say, and they know what they need, or they're trying to figure that out, and someone else
Exactly.
imposing that on them is very.
Unless you're in the military, when you need to be told what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. Right? To be honest, right? For the safety of
Yes.
everybody. Outside
Sure.
of that,
Yeah.
I
For
feel...
safety reasons. Yeah.
For safety reasons, that's exactly it.
Okay.
And I think, like back in our RDI
Yeah.
world, we used to talk about when is the appropriate time for static communication, and it's always when there's a safety risk, right? Your kid's going to run into the street. Nobody's going to stop and say, "Now let's take a look at the situation here." No, we're saying stop
Yeah.
right now. Yeah.
I wonder if there's a
was just-
car coming.
Yeah. I wonder if that's a good idea. Yeah, I don't think so.
The cool part about this podcast is our best performing podcast is declarative language
Yes.
with Linda Murphy, and it's so cool. I'm so happy to see.
It's beautiful.
It-
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah, doing well, and
Yeah.
I keep promoting that book and that podcast, and
Yeah, and so powerful again for everybody, for
They
all
want that. They need
neurotypes,
it.
for every person in communicating, right? And just
Right.
a different approach to interacting, and
Right.
that was a nice conversation.
yeah.
And that is a piece for within the neurodiversity affirming psychotherapy world, which is where I'm working, functioning now, contributing, hopefully. One always hopes. Communication is one of the three key areas. When I'm training people, we talk about communication, and we also talk about sensory processing and executive functioning. And those are the three areas that if I can help therapists understand the role of those in therapy, in setting up the therapeutic alliance, then we have something that will gather steam and that will become useful and helpful. But yeah, the declarative language in the communication piece is absolutely about like bringing down the stress and the demand or perceived demand on the other person, right? Most autistic people will say, and will share, and it's painful when you start to talk about it, but they'll share that they have never had a therapeutic relationship where the therapist actually has been able or open to actually hearing what they have to say. Because it's been super behaviorally based all the way along. Yeah.
Is that
That's
what?
upsetting.
Yeah. What feedback or what do you see are overarching themes that keep coming up? So not being heard. I see that all the
Yeah.
time. It's like going to a talk therapist and you not being able to share anything. They're just telling you what
That's
you
what
need
it
to
is.
do and how do you
That's
fix your
what it
life. Wow.
Or the therapist will, so you go to a talk therapist and you're autistic, so you need a bit longer in terms of processing time to just sort of hear what's being asked or said and then respond. And the therapist, meantime, will repeat the question over and over.
Oh.
Because they're neurotypical and they haven't understood that, no, you're processing. You need quiet now, right? And the therapist needs to wait. So yeah, that's definitely one of the things.
Oh,
Yeah,
I can't
you
imagine.
asked what, oh, I know, right? You asked what comes up regularly, Brian, and certainly being heard and being seen for who I am as an individual, that comes up regularly. So the identity, the neurodivergent identity, over and above the diagnosis of autism or ADHD or anything else, it's about who am I as a neurodivergent individual in this world and how am I going to cope, right? So that whole identity piece. Another piece that I work with folks, almost everybody that I meet with needs some understanding of their own sensory profile. They haven't always been welcomed to have their own individual sensory profile and to get to know it and then to use it as a strength rather than as a problem. You know? And then the executive functioning piece. Just about every autistic, every neurodivergent person will have struggles with executive functioning. And so in the work I do, we need to be super accommodating and supportive around timing of appointments, for example, and people having a hard time remembering that they have an appointment, and how do we support for that, recognizing that's a brain-based thing. It's not that the individual is, not appreciating their therapy or not engaged in their therapy. It's that their executive functioning profile hasn't actually allowed them to open their phone that day and see that they had an appointment. Right?
Yeah, and just thinking about all of that, if you're not with a therapist that's supporting all of those things, especially the appointments, and if they're getting offended that you're not showing up or thinking that you're taking it seriously or whatever their thoughts are about it, or whatever rules they have around it, like, oh, you cancel 3 times, you're out of here, or whatever,
Right.
Then what happens to that individual when that therapist carries out whatever it is they're carrying out, and then that person, I could just see that being a horrible cycle with going through therapists that aren't supporting them through that process. And then it's just like compiling each therapist you go to, and then you're late, or you cancel, or you don't show up, or what, I just see that being a huge issue. Is that something that you see?
Absolutely. It becomes a re-traumatization of the client, because now the relationship breaks down, right? They get the phone call from the admin person or the therapist themselves to say, oh, okay, you've missed 3 appointments, or you haven't paid for your last 2, and so you can't come again, whatever it be, depending, as you say, on policy. And so what that individual now experiences is, here's another relationship where I have failed. Here's another relationship where I'm not up to snuff and I'm not meeting the demands. So how shaming is that, right? So this is, it's not entirely different from what you said earlier when you think about your ABA career and so on, right? Psychotherapists, we need to be thinking about, when have I actually not understood and then inadvertently hurt or traumatized a client? And what am I going to do with that now that I recognize it? It's huge.
Yeah,
right?
That reflection piece. Yeah, it's so important in all that we do. Yeah.
I was also thinking about the sensory profile, and we all have things that we do, all of us, and things that we don't like, and things that get under our skin and make us feel weird. And I always think of the nails on the chalkboard. I can't stand that, and that makes me feel like I want to crawl out of my skin. And I try to help people understand, what if the air conditioner feels to them like the nails on chalkboard feels like to you? Would you be able to keep answering these questions, right? And even the questions. Catherine comes home and asks me 3 questions, and I'm like, all right, that's enough. I need a minute here. I need space. And what if I couldn't? What if I couldn't share that? And what if she just kept going on with questions? Where would our relationship go? I would be like dreading when Catherine gets home if I couldn't advocate for myself and share even the need or where that need comes from. So
there you go. And I think that's the critical question there, Brian, is where would this relationship go if one person was unable to recognize the impact of it on the other? Like, where would it go? My guess is it wouldn't be to a happy place, right? And so similarly between a parent and a child, right? If I'm a neurotypical parent and I have a neurodivergent child and I'm trying to parent them as if they're neurotypical, where's that going to go? It's not going to have a great outcome. So that's another area of my practice is I work with families. So before, if people contact me wanting therapy for their child, that's going to be a yes after you and I have had several sessions. And, modeled after, we all remember the parent education wonderfulness that we learned about in RDI, the idea that if a parent is going to help a child to be well, the parent themselves needs to be well and understand what's going on here. Right?
Definitely.
So not, Catherine, that you're Brian's parent, but it's
Yeah.
just a relationship. It's it's a relationship, and I think you're saying, sounds like you're saying, it's a relationship between different neurotypes. So yeah, let it be that, and obviously you're doing a great job of it because here you are all these years later.
It's always a work in progress.
That's it.
Always,
Yeah.
always.
So you mentioned your book. I want to talk about your book,
Yes.
if that's okay. How
Sure.
did you tell us? How did you get to writing a book? What was the need you saw, and kind of what do you hope people get from your book?
Oh, thanks for asking, Brian. So the book was intended, and I think still is, of most use to clinicians. So it is intended. The title is Neurodiversity-Affirming Psychotherapy, Clinical Pathways to Autistic Mental Health. So it comes from the assumption that there is such a thing as autistic or neurodivergent mental health, and that having a diagnosis or being neurodivergent doesn't actually equate to having a mental health problem. If there is a mental health problem, let's address it in neurodiversity affirming ways, right? So the book is laid out so that it can be used as a textbook at the college or university level. It can definitely be used by clinicians who are in practice and are finding that they're not having the kind of outcomes or connection with neurodivergent clients that they need to have in order to actually facilitate change. And that they usually want to have. We therapists tend to be kind people who want to be connected with our clients, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's about setting up that therapeutic alliance and then following through so that clients who are neurodivergent can actually be helped in psychotherapy of various kinds.
I was at a group home last night, and client takes forever, and I can never get him in the shower at night, and sometimes it takes hours and hours and hours and hours. And one of my kind of areas was, what does the relationship look like? Are you engaging in any kind of outside of demands and tasks? Are you ever just sitting down and playing a game, or having a conversation, or watching TV, or creating something where they might actually want to have that willingness to work with you? Or is it just you come in when it's time for demand, and then you leave
right.
when as soon as they're done, right? And I think that goes a long way. It sounds like
it goes a really long way, right? And we all know, the occasional shower, of course, is necessary, right? That's kind of a given. But what happens in the rest of that relationship is what's going to make that shower possible or not, right? And also validating for that client. I see this is really hard for you. And we have lots of time, and we can go slowly. And how about some earplugs? And how about a bath instead of a shower? Would that be a little easier? Or there's 1,000 ways, right? But it's about establishing some trust there rather than coming in because it's shower day and then struggling with an individual who finds that requirement really, really hard.
How do you be on the same team is one of my recommendations.
Yeah,
Me
right.
against you, this power struggle, fighting is gets you nowhere. How do I allow them to see me as part of the solution, on their team? Hey, buddy, I got the shower warmed up for you, so it's all ready to go when you're ready, right? Hey, I got you a fresh towel. What can you do to support them, to encourage them, to allow them that opportunity to take advantage of that situation? Get in the shower. What are you doing? Come on, hurry up.
Yeah.
That's what all we hear.
Right.
It's like, wow.
And again, nobody wants to hear that.
Do you ever
shouted
hear
at them,
yourself?
right?
It's so hard for me to hear this. So many people don't hear it. Like when I tell people, slow down, listen to how many demands you're getting. And they'll go into the room after I tell them this, and they'll go into a room and they'll just, what are you doing? Stop that. Come back. And we're in this reactive kind of mode and power struggle. It's like, what? I need to remind myself consistently. I used to do that. It's easy for me to see now, 20 years later, right? But in that moment, why don't we see it? It's so obvious to me.
And I think, too, in the observer role, it's easier to see it, too.
Yeah.
When you're in the moment and maybe I think for me, it helps to take their perspective as well, to kind of take both perspectives of the group home staff have a lot of responsibilities. They got to keep all these people alive. They got to get them fed. They got to, make sure laundry's done. They got to keep it clean. They got to also do audits and do all this other stuff. And so they do have a lot of responsibilities. And so they're in that moment feeling that they're in their sympathetic nervous system, maybe fight or flight. They're stressed out. They're not maybe getting paid enough. All the things,
and I get
right?
in those moments in my home environment all the time. So I guess in the work environment.
So that's what I was going to say. Like,
yeah.
I can relate to being in the home environment.
With your
we
own
know all
kids.
the tools. We
It's
know all the
different.
things we should be doing, but sometimes we're still reactive and we still yell and we still have our moments, right? With our own kids. But it's a lot easier when we're going and observing other people and saying, well, so I think it's just that dance of like, okay, meeting everyone where they're at and everyone, and then helping hopefully guide them to like giving them those aha moments, like you mentioned, to help them to think about it versus us then coming in and directing them and saying, well, you should be doing this with them.
No. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And then we're
No,
Don't
that's
do what
it.
I'm telling you,
Yeah.
but do it.
yeah.
You need to blah,
Right.
blah, blah. Yeah.
So you support, through your book, you're supporting professionals to then know a better way to approach their interactions and their therapy. Is that what I'm understanding? And
Yeah.
taking these things into consideration.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'm not sure about better, but it is a more accessible way, because traditional therapy, if you like, in all its many formats, hasn't been accessible to neurodivergent individuals. It hasn't been. And I think this is just a really natural place for the world to be at this point in time. Now that we've understood that there are all kinds of minds, that also opens up the questions around, well, if there are all kinds of minds, how do we support all kinds of minds? How do we teach all kinds of minds? How do we be in love with all kinds of minds? Right? They're just all the important questions. Yeah. So,
And that's like
Yes.
AI too. AI is computer, and they're going to take over. But the this is far fetched. No, but the value is going to be people are still going to have their unique contributions
Yes.
in art, in music, in comedy, whatever it is. That no matter how good AI gets, we're still going to have that personality that they will never have. So the connection there is we don't want people, neurodivergent people, to be this AI one type lane, one thing fix all, because that's not the beauty of. You're confused? Does it make sense?
No, I'm listening.
Okay.
I have thought. I'm thinking.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm thinking too. Yeah. No, I hear you.
Yeah.
I did get a little stuck with the assumption that AI is going to take us all over, because I might not sign up for that, Brian. But
Some people believe that.
I know.
Some
Oh,
people
I know.
Are scared, and
that's
some
out
people,
there.
yeah, some people believe it's gonna take away that mundane, boring job, so then we could all do something that we really love and are passionate about.
Well, that would be
well, and if that's the
positive.
case, yeah, that would be wonderful, right, Catherine? But what happens then to those people who have not actually been allowed to discover what they love and what they are passionate about? So what do we do with that, right? So for me, that still comes back to, let's slow this down a bit, guys, because it's all sort of snowballing with AI. At the end of the day, we need to be able to co-regulate one with another. We need to be able to spend peaceful time, to enjoy one another, to be in relationship with another human, right? There's no robot ever. There's no robot that ever is going to fill that role.
Yeah, definitely.
I believe. Yeah.
I want to know personally, what is secured attachment? And you do a lot of attachment-based work. Tell me, what is a healthy attachment versus what do you see a lot in your work? Because I would like some clarity in that, because maybe I'm obviously not as educated in that realm as you, but what does that look like? What does a healthy attachment look like?
Well, yeah, the attachment relationship. Well, I mean, it looks different depending on whether it's a parent-child relationship or whether it's an adult attachment relationship, etc. But there are some fundamentals. And one of the fundamentals is that essentially the two people like being together, would prefer being together, but are absolutely fine for periods of time when they're not together. So in the attachment world with babies, when we're assessing that, we look at how does this baby cope when their attachment figure, their parent or carer, leaves, right? How does it cope when they leave? How does the baby cope when they leave? And more importantly, almost, what happens when the carer comes back? So we look to see that when the attachment figure leaves, the child notices and is aware and perhaps is slightly more concerned about, am I going to be okay, and who's going to be here for me now, that kind of thing, but doesn't panic. And when the person comes back, that the child welcomes them and is glad they're back, but doesn't, rage at them for having left, and doesn't sort of shrink back for fear of what may happen next. Right? So I often think of a secure attachment relationship as a non-anxious connection between people. I trust you, I rely on you, I know you're going to be there for me. I also know you're not going to do the things for me that I need to do for myself, and you're not going to take things away from me that I actually need to keep me comfortable and secure. Does that answer that question?
Yeah. Yeah, and so could you share a little bit more about if someone is anxious or has an anxious attachment or avoidant or disorganized attachments in contrast to secure?
Yeah, what are some tools people can use to encourage them more?
And so the categories that Catherine is mentioning there are sort of the known categories of insecure attachment, right? And so those are relationships that need a little help, even though earlier I think we turned need into a bit of a naughty word. But in this context, those are relationships that need some support. And so, for example, disorganized attachment, I think, is the one that is often talked about. I do a fair bit of work also in group home settings and kids in foster care and kids who are newly adopted when there's also neurodivergence in the mix, right? And we see a lot of disorganized attachment there, which sort of manifests as really fundamental anxiety about who's here for me, who's got my back, who's going to show up when I need it, right? And so that in kids, that shows as big rage behavior sometimes, a lot of I'm going to detach from you before you can leave me type behavior. And so the work is around supporting the attachment figure, the parent or whomever, to prevent that from happening. Like, no matter how much your child is raging at you, you still self-regulate and stay open and be present and know that this is a really tough moment, but it's going to pass and we're going to be okay here. Repeated experiences of that, right? That doesn't happen overnight. That's not going to convince a child, in one or two examples, but repeated experiences of consistency and reliability in relationship, that's what grows secure attachment when it wasn't there before.
Consistency, just showing up over time.
And being regulated ourselves.
Yeah.
And being regulated ourselves, Catherine. Yeah, absolutely.
That is a challenge. I mean, when your children are raging at you or having challenges, or as we all know, it's hard to stay regulated and not join their chaos, right?
Absolutely.
There's this client in a group home, and he sees his parents on the weekend, and then goes back to the group home, and occasionally, out of nowhere, he has these meltdown behaviors and rages, and out of nowhere, people say, and it's
out of nowhere.
It's not out of nowhere.
Air quotes,
Yeah.
And he does these things, and that would be hard. And he's asking, "Where's Dad? Where's Mom? Why am I here?" And how does?
And probably, I don't know the situation, but probably that situation has been provided in order to support or save or whatever it be others in the family, to prevent that family from coming apart at the seams, right?
Yep.
Sometimes the best that the system can provide is kind of a divide and conquer approach, which is just really sad. You would wish that there could be enough support for that whole family that he could be with his mom and his dad. They probably would love that too.
Yeah, I'm sure they don't feel good.
No.
What do
No.
you recommend in that situation where, you know, like we're doing the air quotes for out of nowhere, but there are staff and people, professionals and parents working with individuals or their kids, and maybe they're not as aware of these attachments, or maybe I'm thinking of like, how could we support them to approach those moments differently?
Yeah.
Am I wording this correctly?
He needs to stop. He needs more discipline. Why, it's all focused on getting
Like
that behavior to stop.
Right, how do we stop
versus
the behavior? How do we
underlying condition, the underlying problem.
Right? How do we stop the behavior? Which translated really means, how do we prevent this person from expressing how they're feeling?
Yeah. So how
Now,
do you support?
is that what we want?
Right.
Right?
Telling us
Right.
something.
But how do you support other people to understand that they're telling us something? Is kind of what that was my question. Of like, how do we?
Yes, and I love how you just said that, as I've been sharing. They're telling us something when they're
Right.
hitting.
It's communication.
It's not that
It's communication.
he's letting us know, hey, I'm upset. I don't like it. I'm mad. And once you're able to see that for me, I have so much more empathy and patience and understanding, and I could connect with them. I see you're
Right.
mad. I see you're frustrated, buddy. And that
Yeah.
just takes it to a whole different level. And there's so much room for processing and moving forward through that moment when you're able to kind of stay regulated myself and de-escalate.
That's it.
I hear you.
That's it. One of the things that comes through my mind that I think is very important is the opportunity, and Catherine, this is in response to your question, like, what do we do? The opportunity to explore this and discuss this with the staff when it's not happening. So when the staff is away from the particular child and in a safe and secure spot. Because the question that, if I'm involved in that situation, the question I'm asking that staff person is, when they're saying like, he needs to listen or she needs to do as, or whatever it is, my question is, and what do you need? What do you need? Because the staff person is not having fun here either. This is not what they signed up for. This is not the job they wanted to be doing. Typically, they are kind, amazing, often skilled people who are in a situation that is beyond what they actually are able to manage within themselves, to cope with within themselves. And so, yeah, when we get to so what do you need, then we're working together, and I'm looking to hear them understand that what they really probably need is more time, right? More self-regulation, so that they can open a space where the child can feel safe and can stop demonstrating in the way they're demonstrating, right?
I love that, asking them what they need.
And it's always easier, sorry, let me cut you off. It's always easier to control what you're doing than trying to get somebody else to how you want to do it. And so if we
Of
control
course.
our regulation
Yeah.
and create space, they're going to join us versus
that's-
getting you to stop and getting you to...
Yeah,
That's
no,
all we
you're
can
exactly
control,
right.
right?
That's
Ourselves.
all we can control. That is exactly it. That's all we have any power over, is how am I going to be? How am I going to move through or be in this situation? What am I bringing, right? If you can put your energy there, you'll make a whole lot more of yourself available, a whole lot more energy, a whole lot more thinking capacity, because you're not totally dysregulated and in your own fight or flight system.
I think it's challenging when you have multiple people involved, especially like the group homes or schools or settings like that, where there's staff members, there's people, supervisors of the staff members, there's parents involved, then you're coming in and consulting or providing therapy, and then the parents might be really wanting the staff then to be getting the thing done, and then the staff's getting the pressure from the parents or the super, so that that dynamic, I'm sure you work with that a lot. Is that something, do you have any other tidbits or any phrases or tips on how then do you approach the group dynamic in that situation?
Well, yeah, and so then I have encountered it a lot, quite often in the school system, more so than in the world of therapy, but I do a fair bit of school advocacy as well. And I find what's really important, first off, is to make sure everybody's at the table, right? So let's not have a meeting with the spec ed teacher and then a separate meeting with the parents and then a separate, let's not be doing that. Let's have everyone at the table and enough space and time for everyone to become and stay regulated. Let's also validate the feelings around the table, because parents typically are very frightened. Below all, they're very frightened of what's going to happen with my child, to my child, for my child. What's going to happen? So they need reassurance, right? And support. And then teachers often are looking for strategies, and I'm usually talking to them about, rather than going to strategies, can we look at the environment where this child spends their time? Can we look at the sensory experience? Can we look at the kind of communication that's being used? That kind of thing. So just, can we look at the executive functioning supports and understanding that if you put a letter in that backpack with a clear instruction to go home and give it to a parent, it's your own energy that you're wasting, right? And then don't be angry with the child because you made an executive functioning demand that was just beyond what their brain could actually process and handle. Of course they said yes because they wanted you to go away and leave them alone. So I think what we're really talking about here is we need to bring people together in non-blaming, non-punitive ways to share their concerns and to establish some goals that are reasonable and are in favor of the child's development and the child's mental health.
Yeah.
Which may or may not include learning the alphabet this year.
Right. Yes.
It might be about spending time with some peers with support on the yard, or it might be about spending time with animals instead of peers, or it might be about working on their own interoception to heighten their self-awareness so that they can leave the classroom before everything comes apart, whatever it be, right?
Yes.
And autism is not disability in not knowing your numbers or letters or
Right.
community helpers or all these things that we generally tend to target, and it's
helpers.
very frustrating. I know. It's like, come on, what is it about? That's just the early target that
lots of
most
flashcards
ABA
on community helpers.
ABLE's system focuses on, and when we're targeting these, we're actually driving disconnection from social interaction, social engagement, positive experiences, which is the underlying what we want to strengthen and build. And I always say to parents, when they're 20, do you think they'll be able to know how to tie their shoes? Sure, they say. And I said, well, okay, so why are we so focused on getting them to tie their shoes today? Well, if you knew it was going to happen, let's back off.
Could you maybe let it go? Yeah.
The pressure.
And if they're 20 and well able to tie their shoes, because developmentally that's likely to have kicked in, but don't have a friend or anybody they can talk to, what's really the problem here? What is it that we really want to be addressing?
Just want to be on their iPad all day. No kidding, they do, because social interactions are so stressful and alarming and chaotic. I get it. I would be too. They don't want to. That's their safe place.
That's right. That's their safe place, and they haven't been provided really a feasible alternative, right? With the right kind of support to make that alternative work.
Good.
And it is, I heard you say earlier, Catherine, something that I think it's sort of sitting with me, which is, it's hard. It's hard. And yeah, it is hard. And blessings on, I think her name is Glennon Doyle on her podcast, that we can do hard things.
Yes.
We can do hard things. And the three of us sitting here know well, we've all done some really hard things in our lives. And here we are. And people can do hard things. So on the days when parenting your kids and loving them at the same time feels hard, let it be so, but know that the loving part never goes away.
Yeah.
What is neurodiversity affirming practices, and how can parents with neurodivergent children, how can they engage in this practice? I know you shared some being heard and seen, which all of us, I think, that's what we want in life, right? Is to be heard and be seen. Is there things that you help parents understand or organize or process with that? So what does that mean to you, first of all? What is neurodiversity affirming practices?
Neurodiversity affirming practice. So neurodiversity is different from neurodivergence. Neurodiversity refers to the fact that as a species, we all have different neurological arrangements. So neurodiversity about people is essentially the same as biodiversity about the planet. Like, nobody's exempt, right? Yeah. So that's an important piece, to recognize that between any parent and child, they are not your clone. They have a different brain than yours. Guess what? Yeah. So curiosity is a really important piece of neurodiversity affirming parenting, right? Be curious and stay curious about who your child is as an individual, what matters to them, what's not okay for them, like nails on a chalkboard you talked about earlier, Brian. And I think, it's a very common example. I think often in families, for example, food-related arguments, and you have to have,
eating your vegetables,
whatever, all of that stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But if eating my vegetables actually involves developing a really unhealthy set of coping mechanisms involving like spitting it into my hand and getting rid of it when mom or dad isn't looking, then really how important was that? And what did I actually learn about myself and other people and the world by having to pretend I'm eating that piece of broccoli, So I think curiosity and genuine interest in who your child is as a person is a huge piece of neurodiversity affirming parenting. And sorry, Catherine, I'm on a rant here, but
no, I love it.
This is so good. This is so good.
I just feel like this is for all parenting too. Yes. I want to acknowledge and honor neurodiversity, definitely. But if all parents could start with curiosity and move in this manner, wouldn't the world be less forcing people to conform and less, more accepting of authentic human beings, not, I want you to continue though. Go ahead.
Wouldn't we then be a more mentally healthy species?
Yes.
Because when we as parents accept our children truly and with curiosity and so forth, they learn from that, oh, I'm kind of interesting. People would want to be around me because I'm unique and I have something to offer. So now we have a mentally healthy young person growing up, right? In response to Brian's question, so if we sort of narrow it then to the idea of neurodivergence, now we're talking about sort of differences that are maybe posing challenges in the parent-child relationship. And one of the things that I always work with parents on, and I really believe is important, is first learn to be well yourself. Learn to self-regulate. Recognize when you're not okay and take care of yourself. And I think many people become parents at such a young age before they themselves have learned this about themselves, Yeah. And so it's really important, if you want your child to grow up with a sense of their own capacity to be in a relationship, then you have to be okay in the relationship yourself, because you're the model, Yeah.
Yes.
That was the first thing we learned as a firefighter, paramedics. Make sure you have your equipment on, your personal safety, and then the scene was safe before you did anything else. That was always 1 and 2. How can you help other people if you're not safe?
Yeah. And that's the airplane with the oxygen mask. Put yours on first before you try to put someone else's on and you run out of air.
Exactly so. Yeah. Exactly so. And of course, as parents, we all understand there are moments when your sort of innate protective mechanism kicks in But we have the capacity to recognize that that's what's happening, and I still need to put my own oxygen mask on first. Absolutely.
Yes.
Literally and metaphorically, right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
I don't know what I'd do. I think I'd probably try to tell the kid. I don't
If
know.
you
We'll
were on
see.
an airplane?
Yeah, I don't know. Let's not test it out.
You said we'll see. Let's not see. Let's
Well,
me
the other
how-
thing about the airplane, sorry, Brian, the other thing, because that airplane analogy is often used, and I think
Does
it's
it?
really helpful.
Yeah.
Right? It's really helpful. But I think we all, those of us who travel, and you may remember I have family in Ireland, so I sort of commute the transatlantic route still on a very regular basis, right? But so often when you sit in your seat, you put on your seatbelt and you get organized and whatever, and when the safety reminder starts, nowadays, most people just absolutely tune it out. Totally tune it out. They even continue talking to the person next to them with no regard for whether somebody maybe might be on their first flight here and might want to hear a bit about it, right? For reassurance. But I think that this is a moment for mindfulness. Sure, you know it all. Sure, you've heard it 100 times. Would it really hurt you to actually put down your book or your iPad and just focus and listen for the 5 minutes? I don't think it would. I don't think it does any harm, and I think it could do some good. No? So mindfulness of that shows up for therapists as a huge need, shows up for parents as a huge. We all need to be present to do the work.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, how has mindfulness played a role in your practice? It's really focusing on. I've learned through my journey, it's not clearing the mind and thinking of nothing, because that's impossible. But really taking it from, and this was helpful for me, is when you do get distracted, and you return to the present moment. That is the opportunity, that's the learning, that without being distracted, you wouldn't be able to come back and be mindful and present in the moment. So that is the practice of being distracted and then coming back and being present.
Yes. Awesome. And then you even have a moment of gratitude that sort of plops in there too, like, oh, I came back. Look at me go, right? Yeah. No, it's a daily practice for me. So in answer to that question, daily for me, and also ongoing through the day, right? It just in little moments. And so whenever a client is interested to learn about it, I'm right there. And usually they'll say, and Catherine, I'm sure you've heard lots of people say this, the old meditation doesn't work for me.
Oh, yes.
That one, yeah.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. I can't clear my mind. Well, you're not really supposed to. Yeah, it's the process of coming back to the present moment, being here now.
Over and over
Yes.
and over. And sometimes, particularly with neurodivergent folks, I'll sort of explain, thoughts are just what minds do. Hearts beat and lungs expand
Right.
and contract, and livers do whatever livers do with bile and everything else, and minds think. And why would you try to fight that? Why not just recognize that's what it does? It doesn't mean you have to jump onto the train every time, right?
Right.
But your mind is just doing what minds do, and you can just keep coming back.
And it builds. I did 100 hours, and I noticed that when I was practicing regularly during the day, the more times I'd notice in the moment that I was in the moment, or be reminded to come back to the moment. So it definitely built. It kind of like my breathing, or the box breathing that you practice, and self-regulation. The more you take that step, the more you see it and notice it in my life.
Yeah.
You're building the neural pathway. That's why we call it the practice, because you're all the time practicing. And then at some point in the practice, you realize, oh, this is actually getting a little more like a default, a little easier.
Yep.
So you keep practicing, right?
Yeah. But the more we fight it and try to think, oh, no, I just have to have this clear, complete blank slate. Nothing should be happening up there. And then a thought comes up, and then it causes stress, and then you're trying to get rid of the more you're caught up in that cycle, right? And fighting it, pushing it away, then it's coming up more. But then if you could just think about it non-judgmentally, thanks, brain, thanks, mind. That's what you're supposed to be doing.
And weren't we built on keeping safe and not
Yeah.
getting eaten? And so
Right.
our brain is going to go to fear and safety and anxiety of what's out there and wanting to become safe.
Right. But now, instead of a saber-toothed tiger chasing us. It's our email that we open. That's like, right?
Yeah.
Well, and that's it. I was gonna add something similar, Catherine, which is the response that we have to that check, like when are we safe here? Is this a safe thought? Are we okay here? Right? The response that we have, I think, is critical, because if we're able to just say, "Oh, that's just a thought," and there it goes, that's fine, and then and then come back to what we were doing, it is so much more mindful than, "Oh, that feels horrible. I think I better scroll Instagram for a while and see if the rest of the world is exploding the way my internal world is exploding," right? And sure enough, you'll find that, yeah, it is. Everybody's just as anxious as you. Yeah, good luck with that.
And that pours gasoline on the fire, right?
Gasoline on the fire, right? Somewhere along the way, we have to say, yeah, maybe it was just a thought after all. Who knew?
I was wondering, you said you go to Ireland and you're in Canada and you've spent some time in the States. Is there a noticeable difference in the way therapeutic approaches, or have you seen, is it pretty common, or what have you noticed in your experiences and travels in different countries? Is there a difference?
There is a difference. There are lots of differences, Brian. I'm actually really at the moment so excited about what's happening in Ireland with neurodiversity awareness, let's just say. Like, there's close to the place where I grew up in South Dublin, there's a community where a bunch of parents, and I'm going to be open, I believe they were a bunch of moms, decided that they were going to make their town or their community into the most neurodiversity-affirming community in Ireland. And they went ahead and did that. And it was everything from, providing times to go grocery shopping when you won't be exposed to all the sound, all the lights, all of the stuff, right? And the playgrounds were adapted and the schools got on board. And that has spread all across Ireland, which Ireland is a very small country, as we know, but there's a lot of amazing stuff that's happening there just at the moment, which is really cool. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I know that it's not just the once a week sensory friendly movie time.
Oh, yeah.
So it's
The
a good
1
start,
hour,
right?
they have like 8 to 9 grocery store sensory friendly grocery from
there?
like
Have you
8
heard
a.m.
that?
tonight. It's like,
I've
who's
never even heard
getting
that.
up? And,
Yeah.
Who's awake and wanting to go grocery shopping at
Right.
that time?
And to get ready and out the door by 8 to get to that sounds stressful.
But, we start on these pathways in rocky kinds of ways, and we recognize that it's not going to be perfect right from the start, but the intention was certainly good. We could believe that the intention was good, and then we can come back around and start advocating for, could we actually have that beautiful thing available at an accessible time when, a person would be able to make use of it, that kind of
baby steps, and then just growing.
Yes, yeah. So that, and when we are aware of those baby steps, I think it also helps us to manage that sense of overwhelm that you spoke about earlier. That, let's be aware of what is happening, And here in Canada, certainly there is huge interest, huge curiosity, lots of small pockets. I belong to a neurodiversity-affirming community of practice, which is based close to where I live, which is just outside of Kingston in Ontario. And so we have it, there are a number of us involved with it, and then it's an open invitation to any clinician or any educator who would like to join some Friday afternoon, pop in and let's have some conversation about different topics, right? So I'm excited about what's happening here. Like you, Brian, I would love it to be happening 10 times faster. Love it. But it's not. So that's just a thought. We can let that one go.
Seeing the positive in it and seeing the changes and spotlighting that for ourselves will help us to keep moving forward and doing the good work, the things that we know are positive and helpful and supportive.
What is thrive? Because I think our objective is, what does it look like thriving for ourselves and different people, and in personal and professional, but how does the journey and taking that step forward and letting go of what society thinks is thriving, and what does thriving feel like and look like for you, but also your clients? What does it look like for you, and maybe some things you hope to see with your clients?
Oh, that's awesome. I love what you said in the middle there, because it's so very resonant for me, which is thriving looks different and feels different for any individual, for every family, for every client. Like, who's to say, right? But I do believe that a piece of thriving is finding yourself or positioning yourself in a place and a time and with people where you feel you belong, right? Belonging and feeling like you have a contribution that is valued, that you have something to learn from. That these are, for me, these are elements of thriving, very definitely, right? Belonging is so critical to mental health and well-being. And we belong in all different ways, in all different settings, you know? So I think, yeah, belonging, and then having some goals, like having some things that you yourself want to do. And I don't mean smart goals, but I mean, you know, things that you want to do in your life that will be benchmarks for thriving. And for me, certainly my book was one of those. I've been a writer my entire life, and I've never actually wrapped a book in a cover. And here, would you like to see it?
Yes, please.
It's out and it's available, and
Yes, look at, there it is.
And I love it.
Oh, it's beautiful.
They're so official.
Oh, the fingerprint of the brain. I love that.
Fingerprint of the brain. Yeah, right. That notion that we each have a unique fingerprint. Mm-hmm. We each have a unique brain. Yeah. And I can tell you too, because I love this story. If you're wondering why it's blue, why the cover is blue, you might have been wondering, or you might have.
Please tell us.
We did hear yesterday that if you have blue in your video in social, it's going to be increased because, what was the reason?
People are drawn to blues and greens because it's part of nature, and that's part of our.
There's a calming, I think, therapeutic nature to that color. But I don't know if that's why you chose it, but
there you go.
Really interesting. No, the reason it's blue is because when I was coming towards the end of it, and the question was coming up with my publisher about cover and colors and all of that stuff, my son, who I know you met years ago, Brian, my son, who now lives in BC, in Vancouver, was telling me on the phone one day that he'd had this dream. And in the dream, Mommy, you're not going to believe this, but I was on the SkyTrain in the dream, and the guy opposite me was reading your book. And I said, no. Oh my goodness. And so I said, so what color was it? And he said, it was blue. Oh. So I said, all right then, it's going to be blue. Nice. Yeah, so these are the moments, right? These are the moments. And so
scientific and data driven. I love it.
So data driven, exactly. Well, and so now, see, it just turns out that it's supported by what you just said, which is people are going to love it because it's blue, right?
Yes, you got to flash it on the screen whenever you are promoting it. So the blue comes and put some waves behind it.
Algorithm is going to push it. What do you hope for the future? What's your hope for this process? For people in? I know that's a huge question. I always get mad at Catherine for generalized, huge, big questions. But where would you love? For me, get curious, ask questions, be open to other perspectives. I think that we see that all in the political world and the religious world, and it's all divisive. It's I'm right, you're wrong. And that doesn't suit anybody ever any good. And I think that's part of our journey has always been curiosity and everything we're doing and asking questions and wanting to learn. And it's exciting because people have gotten to that point because that's where it led them, and they truly believe that. And like, well, how'd you get there? Why do you believe that? You're crazy. Well, they had their journey that led them to that point. Is that crazy?
And how, well, no, but it's so interesting if you drop the you're crazy, if you just ask somebody like, how did you get there? Then it's curiosity, and it's awesome. If you slap on the, I think you're crazy, now we have a problem, that we didn't have.
Yeah, nobody.
You're already coming in with your lens and analyzing.
I don't want to answer to somebody that calls me crazy. Yeah.
No, exactly. I think that conversation just ended right there. But if they just asked, how did you get there? Like, what's that about? How did you believe that? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I'm right with you. Curiosity is a beautiful thing, and it's a real bridge between people. And for me, I would add to that authenticity. I think it's really important at this time in history and at this in this milieu that we're all in, no matter what work we're doing or no matter what our roles in the world, I think we need to be coming to those roles with our true, authentic selves. And I think great things happen when people are real and true and authentic.
Absolutely.
I agree. Just thinking about that with authenticity and curiosity, and we talk about masking. Don't we all mask to some extent? And aren't we all, like, if we could all drop all of that and live more authentically and show up, wouldn't we all be connecting more in a better way? And that would be supporting neurodiversity in a different way. And I mean, do you know where I'm?
Yeah, Jenny said yesterday, she said, kids are scared of the dark, adults are scared of the light. And that, I think, is what you're saying.
Whoa, that's really interesting.
Right.
If we all shined our truest and brightest light.
We'll turn the light on ourselves and be exposed, be vulnerable.
Oh, and that too.
Right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, showing your truest authentic light would be, putting you in a vulnerable position to be judged and you're not conforming to other people's ways. And then, but if we could all just do that.
If we could all, and I think that's the key. I don't know that there will ever be a time when we will all, as a species, commit to it. But I would agree with you, Catherine. Absolutely. That would be, we would connect so much more deeply. That would be such a more creative and loving and respectful world to be living in. Absolutely.
Yes. And if we're asking autistic people to not mask or to expect them to be authentic in their expression of who they are, but we're not, other people aren't willing, how does that work out? That makes sense.
And I don't know that unilaterally dropping the mask is at all a safe thing. Certainly when I'm working with folks who are talking about their own masking, their own experience of masking, we look together at, it's your choice. It is your choice whether and when you use the mask that you have worked so long and hard and at your own personal expense to develop. There may be times where you are safer and feel safer using that mask. Mm-hmm. And that's your choice. There may also be times where your relationships work better and you can be your more authentic self when you choose to set it down for a while, Because of who I am and the way I work, I'm less inclined to suggest to people that they rip off the mask and shatter it on the floor because,
Right, yeah. Yeah.
Even as a therapist, you have your mask
right, I'm thinking
that
of all my
you're
masks.
you're presenting in that professional role.
Right.
Right. And I don't, I think we need to do another podcast on the question of masking, guys.
Yeah, we should, because I have a lot of thoughts and experience with it myself. I'm realizing that, learning about it, and so we can cut this off, and then we could do another segment. But I would.
That's a really interesting and compelling question for sure. Yeah.
Where can people find your book? Where can people learn more information? What's another good book that maybe you might recommend, or a site or information where people want to learn more?
Beautiful. So what jumps to my mind is another good book right now. Devon Price has written Unmasking Autism, which is a fantastic book. Super well researched, and I just learned recently actually that they have a subsequent book coming out in March, which is Unmasking for Life, I think is the title. So if people are looking for more of this sort of type of discussion and insight, that's a spot. My own book, so on my website, ruthstrunz.com, there is a beautiful little orange button that says order your book.
Yes.
That's the best way.
Easy.
That's the best way.
Easy,
yeah,
easy.
for sure.
Awesome.
And thank
That
you
sounds good.
guys for that
thank
opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. You're definitely a professional therapist because just the way you talk and your tone and it's so comforting, and I'm so drawn into you. You're wonderful.
And I forget, it's like I want to go back and see what I said because I'm so comfortable with Ruth just talking with her that it's like, should we Yeah.
This has been really, really great. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, Brian, to be honest, this is only the second podcast I've ever done.
Wow.
You made it easy
so
for
nice
us. So,
to talk with you.
so many good tools. I'm so excited to share this one. You have so much good, valuable information and well polished. Like I stumble sometimes in sharing. I think we have the same kind of underlying, but very well polished, and I love it. So thank you. This is great.
Well, thank you both. The work you're doing is so valuable, so valuable. It's just so lovely to see you again and reconnect like this. Yeah.
Let's keep in touch. We appreciate your time.
I look forward to it. Thanks, Brian
you.
and Catherine.
Thank you.
You're welcome.